Hi, everyone, and welcome back. Today we have a very special guest, a truth teller and dark occult destroyer, John Hamer. John is a prolific full-time professional author, geopolitical researcher, analyst, and public speaker, and has published 8 books to date. His first didactic epic, The Falsification of History, is not only a bestseller, but a must-have handbook for the adept, walking the narrow path to discovery of what the true nature of this place really is. John's works cover many topics, from a detailed new look at the JFK assassination to his connected works on the myths and legends of the fated Titanic, a watery, deep deception indeed. His book, Behind the Curtain, is a topic that is very close to my heart: the uncovering and unveiling of the worldwide monetary deception and banking system fraud, which backs up his latest book, The Falsification of Science, which highlights, along with all his other works combined, how this perverted corporatocracy have distorted our history and science for centuries to pursue their own sordid agenda and create a false reality for humanity by the draconian powers that shouldn't be in their never-ending agenda for the total subjugation of the human race. John, no mean feat. Welcome, and it is an honour to have you here today.
Thank you, Callie. It's nice to be here. Oh, excuse me. Clear my throat. That'll help, won't it?
I believe you were talking last night, so are you a little bit
Yeah,
hoarse? I believe you did
just a
talk.
bit. No, I'm okay actually, but yeah, it just caught my throat there for a second. But yeah, I was talking last night and for too long as usual. But yeah, here I am.
Well, it's like when I said off camera to you, John. My granddad used to say to me, "You're a good turn, but you're on too long."
Yeah,
That's about
yeah,
me,
that was
not
probably
you.
me last night actually. Yeah.
No, no, I very much doubt it. So I met you in Burnley, John, of all places, where we were both
Yeah,
doing talks on the work that we do. And so
brilliant.
there were many crossovers, and we chatted briefly, didn't we? But
Yeah.
most definitely nowhere near long enough. And I doubt I don't have any, near enough hours in my lifetime to kind of cover the research that you've done, and your extensive research. It really is. That you have diligently and passionately compiled. And I know you do this with your partner Shannon Rowan. So John, I mean seriously, I am blown away by the sheer volume of your work. And without getting in, without going getting some crackers for the cheese I'm about to spout here, your work is truly a gift for humanity in our long-suffering quest
Oh,
to
thank you.
return to
That's
the
so nice.
is.
I'm not sure I deserve that, but it's very nice of you to say so, Callie. Thank you.
I do like my intros, but
Yeah,
and you're a Yorkshire lad as well. So as I
yeah,
say, the Northerners are truly leading the charge, and as it always was,
yeah.
I believe. So before we deep dive some of your research and your books,
Hmm.
let's get to know you a little bit. So
Okay.
what got you here, and what was your catalyst, and how has that kind of carved out your path? The path that you find yourself on now.
Yeah, I mean that's a good place to start. Yeah, I mean I've been doing this for 27 years now, just about. It started in 1997 with the death of Princess Diana. For anybody out there who's heard me give this little story on other podcasts, I do apologise, but I'll tell it again for those who haven't. It was Princess Diana's death that kicked it off. What it was, my wife at that time and I, we had some friends who were in Paris that weekend, and it was an August bank holiday weekend, wasn't it, in '97? And they'd been out for a meal that evening. They went back to their hotel room, switched on the TV, and the first images that they saw on the news broadcasts were Princess Diana walking unaided into the ambulance. Right,
Yeah,
this was on the mainstream news. And we know that the first news reports that you see are always going to be more accurate because the agenda's not been sorted out at that point. So yeah, she saw these images and she came back and she said, we went for a coffee with them, and she said, I can't believe it. She said, you know, we've seen Diana. She was walking into the ambulance. We were told that she never regained consciousness. She was carried into the ambulance and died on the way to hospital. I said, no, you must have been mistaken. Are you sure? Absolutely positive. She said, we'd had a couple of glasses of wine, she said, but we weren't drunk. So we know what we saw. And anyway, so that kind of kicked me off down that path. And at that time as well, my wife at that time was secretary to a guy by the name of Stephen Dorrell, not the ex-MP Stephen Dorrell, but a guy who wrote a Times top 10 bestseller called MI6. And she was writing his, typing his work for him. And he used to bring books and used to put little yellow sticky notes in various different passages of all these books. And I'd never seen books like these before. They were coming out with all these outlandish, to me at that time, statements about this and that and the other royal family, this and that. And I'm like, wow, I've never seen anything like this before. So I've started reading these books, and that's really what began my quest for the truth, if you like. And it just went from there. And I've always had a penchant for writing, so I started writing articles for websites, various websites. And then somebody said to me, "You should write a book because you write really well." And I thought, no, I can't do that. But eventually, it took me a while, but eventually I wrote The Falsification of History, which took me about 3 years to write. I mean, it's a big book, I'd never done anything like that before, so it was quite a task for me at that time. So yeah, that was published in 2012, and it's just gone from there, really. And I've been doing this full time since 2001. So, and of course, 9/11 was another big catalyst. That really, I mean, as soon as that happened, I knew there was something not right with that.
And like you say, there's these big markers to it, aren't they? That act as kind of awful as these events are, they act as catalysts for our awakening. It's that kind of backdrop for us to bounce off it. Like the sigil of Lucifer. It's like, and it's in our psyche, really. And once you've seen it, as we always say, you kind of can't unsee it. I mean, I remember the Princess Diana death, of course, whether you believe she's dead or not. I mean, it's like the definition of a conspiracy theorist, isn't it? What is the definition of a conspiracy? It's when two or more people get together to make something happen. It's as simple as that. And we know that it's this label that's, with us with our tinfoil hats on, just to discredit us, and a label for critical, to admonish the critical thinkers, really.
Absolutely.
But I remember at the time when in Paris, in that tunnel, all the cameras all failed, unfortunately, didn't they? And that had never happened, since 1970 or something. In like, I think it had happened once in. So it's like, when do things stop being a conspiracy theory and start being a conspiracy fact? It's there's too many coincidences, and I don't believe in them.
No, I don't.
I mean,
I always say that, Kelly. I always say I don't believe in coincidences. There's always something behind it,
No, and that part goes into probably one of my next questions. Just listening to you, though, we know about the importance of numbers and the way that these things are kind of scripted with these numerological values when we understand numerology, etc. Especially with 9/11. 9/11 is such an occult number. Actually, allegedly, the birthday of, and I shouldn't say birth because birth is their system, the born day of the Christ. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. What do you think about, John? Have you looked into kind of scripted reality and because what we tend to say is, and we love the stories, don't we? We're kind of a species that loves a good story, loves a good tale, and that's how they kind of hijack our consciousness, to me. But certainly when we can start to decode, as you have, at the level you have, do you find that, I would say, narratives lie but numbers don't? What do you think about numerology and this potential that we're in this matrix, this scripted kind of reality? As you kind of studied.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do. I mean, they actually live, and I mean, they believe in numerology to a massive extent. I mean, I'm not sure that I do in the same way that they do, but they definitely use numbers to send messages, either to us subliminally or to other factions within their band, because it's not just one group, it's lots and lots of disparate groups that control us, but they've all got this kind of, they're all connected at the top level. But they do pass messages between all these different factions, and they use numerology to do that. So there's so much significance in the dates of lots and lots of different events. So yeah, absolutely, it's an absolute fact. I once read a book on numerology, and I found it a little bit over the top, if I'm being honest. Some of the stuff that this person was reading into certain things, I just thought, no, I couldn't quite get there. But there's no doubt that they do use numerology. They use numerology for everything that they do. There's got a number attached to it of some description that is significant. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, like you say, they're coding to each other, as we know, and we discuss on this
Yeah.
channel all the time, aren't they?
Yeah.
Using numbers, using their symbols. And as I say, their arrogance with that is kind of becoming their undoing, really, because we're starting to learn the code, and that's, a great part of what you do with your work. I mean, touching on the royals there, going back to that, we know. I mean, a friend of mine, John Cooper, I do some interviewing with. We've just interviewed Matt Letizia, who's a great
Okay.
character at the moment because he's speaking out. He's got a great platform. He's been a celebrity. He's been a footballer and speaking out about, the footballers dropping dead on the football fields. I mean, and coming out and having that platform is just amazing, kind of for
Yeah.
the rest of us.
Yeah.
Because to make us look less like blah, 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 like we've lost our minds and dealing, like we're saying, conspiracy facts, not theories. But in relation to, say, like somebody like Jimmy Savile, me and John Cooper's actually interviewed a guy called John Wedger, who's spent a lot of time
Yeah. I've heard of him.
uncovering satanic ritual abuse, etc., and so
Yeah.
on. And we know
Yeah.
that it
Yeah.
kind of goes all the way up to the tops with the royals. I mean, the royals themselves, what do you think? I think people who are hanging around with Jimmy Savile, Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, Rolf Harris, and so on and so on. And these are their best mates and godfathers to their children. I mean, Jimmy Savile is from Yorkshire. So it all stems from God's country, John. Like, but whose
Yeah.
God are they
God's own acres.
worshipping?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hell's Mouth there. And he was the seventh son of a seventh son, which has a lot of magical, again, there's those numbers, those numerical properties. And the
Yeah.
fact that he did kind of hypnotize a nation, didn't he? I mean, coming from Yorkshire, and obviously all your investigations with the Royals, what do you think about them? What kind of place do you think they're holding and what kind of game are they playing? Because as you kind of said, there's something above them that's far darker, I think. I
Yeah.
don't think it's a bunch of men in a room going, right, what we're going to do. I think that
Yeah.
something's feeding these people or these elites or these families, these bloodlines. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that, John?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't have a definitive answer. Nobody really knows what exactly goes on at these upper levels, whether it be some kind of, you know, supernatural force or whatever, or whether it's actually just humans like us. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I do know that the royals are just part of the whole fake reality that we live in. They're like our figureheads that we're supposed to look up to and worship and bow down in reverence to at every opportunity. They're used as a way of controlling the people, not just physically but psychologically. It gives us something to, not us because we don't operate
No.
in that way, but I'm talking about the masses here. It gives the masses something to cling to and aspire to, and it's all part of the control, the overall control mechanism. But as to whether David Icke famously said that the royals were lizards. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
don't really buy into that, to be fair. And I don't know whether that was just misinformation or not, or disinformation rather, not misinformation.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, they're there. They do have power. They pretend that, they're just figureheads. They don't have any power. They absolutely do. And I can tell you for an absolute fact, having researched it for many, many months, that they were absolutely behind the death of Diana. Absolutely, there's no question about it. I know this for a fact. So yeah, they're very, very influential. Yet hide behind this idea that they don't have any real power. They're just figureheads.
Yeah. Wow. And that's it, isn't it? And I think this idea is difficult with the Ike thing, with the lizards thing, because in one way, I remember, I read David Icke stuff in my 20s and I was going around telling people about the space lizards. And I think, a friend of mine at the time, he went, a bit like my granddad, it's good what you're saying, because I was awake, but leave the lizards out of it because we tend to lose people at the lizards. And especially when we're trying to get this crossover of
Yeah,
facts, that you present, really well in your research, in your books.
yeah,
And I think everyone has been under this mass formation psychosis. We talked about that with John on the interview, saying with this ability of Savile to somehow hypnotize the whole nation into so that he could just move around like some kind of witch or wizard and do what it was. And this idea of lizards, I think, is lower base frequency, they say. So our lizard mind or our reptilian brain. So it represents this psychopathy.
Yeah.
It represents the lower base kind of frequencies, which is what they want to keep us under
Yeah, yeah.
in this toxic world. Toxins in our food, spraying the air, dumbing us down, selling us sex, keeping us in commerce and commercial activity so that we aren't leveling up and, keep them sick and keep them stupid, isn't it?
Yeah,
Which I
absolutely.
suppose neatly brings us into, I know you did, like we said, a book about the banking system,
Yeah.
which obviously the JFK, the Titanic, and the banking system, all those three things obviously extremely connected, aren't they? So most people will kind of have heard the general JFK. I mean, I went nuts on JFK in my 20s doing, going down the rabbit holes and everything. But do you want to kind of tie those because obviously you've done two books on the Titanic, the kind of
Yeah.
stories, is it,
Yeah,
connected and
too. Yeah. Well,
yeah,
what
the JFK.
just to cover that bit first, the
Yeah.
Titanic thing. Yeah, I mean, I've written two books on Titanic, but one was a factual book about what really happened at Titanic, and believe me, the story is absolutely not as you'd expect. It's nothing at all like they tell us. Nothing at all like the James Cameron film, which is the apocryphal Titanic story. I mean, obviously everybody realizes that's fiction, but there was actually a film, a book written in the 1950s by a guy by the name of Walter Lord, who was an American guy. He was ostensibly a lawyer, but he was actually a CIA agent as well. And it was him that formulated the current Titanic story. And the book was called A Night to Remember. And they made a film of it in the late 1950s with the British actor Kenneth More in it. And that became the de facto truth about Titanic, and the truth is nothing like that. But anyway, what I was going to say was I've written two books. The first one is a factual description of exactly what happened, and it's a very, very long, convoluted story. For example, I once did a 4-hour podcast on Titanic and didn't cover anything, believe it or not. Yeah. And the second one was a novel based on the factual book. And the reason I wrote a novel, because novels are not my thing at all. The reason I wrote a novel was that in about, I think it's 2013, I was invited to go to Hollywood to actually talk about making a film of the alternative Titanic story. And I stayed with this film director. She's not a famous one, but she's made quite a few films. I stayed with her in a ranch in the Hollywood Hills for a couple of weeks, and we went round film producers, trying to drum up some support and some cash to make the film. Anyway, cut a long story short, it never happened. Nobody was interested apart from one guy who said, "You've got to write a book. It's got to be based on a book." So I wrote RMS Olympic, which is my Titanic story, and sent him the manuscript. He said, "Oh, no, 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 no." He said, "It's got to be a novel." I'm like, "Oh, God." I spent about 8 weeks. I just absolutely burning the midnight oil. Spent 8 weeks writing that. And then I had to write a novel. And then at the end of the day, I sent him the transcript of the novel. And it wasn't, and he says, "No, I'm not interested anymore. Sorry." But I got 2 books out of it and a nice trip to Hollywood. Thank you very much. But that was about it. So yeah, I'm digressing a little bit. So that's the Titanic element to it. But yeah, the Titanic, the connection to the banking system. I'm sure it's becoming more common knowledge now than it was at the time when I wrote the books, more than 10 years ago. But on board the Titanic were 3 guys who opposed the Federal Reserve. That was John Jacob Astor, who was regarded as the richest man in the world. It wasn't really, because the Rothschilds are always the richest people in the world, but they never get mentioned for some strange reason that I can't quite fathom. There was John Jacob Astor, Benjamin Guggenheim, and a guy by the name of Isidor Straus, and they were the 3 most prominent opponents of the Federal Reserve. And they weren't opposing it for altruistic notions, of helping the people. It was because they knew what the Federal Reserve Bank would do, and that is it would bring in massive inflation, as all central banks do. And what does inflation do? It's a hidden tax. They knew that it would severely affect their fortunes, so they've got this big campaign going on the eastern seaboard of the States to fight J.P. Morgan and the others that were conspiring to usurp the creation of money from the American people and set up this central bank called the Federal Reserve. Which, by the way, for those who are not aware, is a private company. It's nothing to do with the government. It's neither federal nor does it have any reserves. But there you go. It's deception for you, isn't it? So
Double speak.
yeah. So Morgan enticed. Again, this is cutting. This is a very very tiny thumbnail sketch. Morgan enticed those three people onto the maiden voyage of the Titanic, which actually wasn't the Titanic because its sister ship, its elder sister ship, they were virtually identical but not quite, had been involved in several accidents, one of which was critical. Now, she'd been involved in a collision with a British battleship in the Solent, just off the Isle of Wight, and the damage was far more substantial than they thought. So they actually declared it a wreck at one point, and then miraculously, a few weeks later, it was back on the sea. But I don't want to give too much away, but it's safe to say that that was not the Titanic that sank. It was RMS Olympic. They killed two birds with one stone. J.P. Morgan. It was an insurance scam, and it was to get rid of his the anti-Fed-res conspirators. So, in a very, very, very brief nutshell, and trust me, there is masses and masses more information that I could talk about, but obviously it's limited time here, so I won't. But yeah, that's just a very brief snapshot of what happened regarding the Titanic. It's a fascinating story, and so easy to prove that premise that it really is. And I've done that, I believe.
And I think that's it, like you say, John, isn't it? It's like I said, the banking system itself is a house of cards. It's a castle built on sand. It's so delicate, that system, because it's all built on fraud and deceit and lies. So it's like I look at it like a big Jenga, and all you have to do is just start to pull the cubes out at the bottom, and the whole. It's like the Eye of Sauron, in it, in Lord of the Rings. The eye's like this, desperately trying to find Frodo with the ring, and then the Hobbit just comes. And I know it's not that simple because he obviously had to go through his trials, etc., and then the whole thing falls down, doesn't it? And I think that is kind of what we're kind of seeing at the moment. This fall of Rome, and the Hollywood or Hollyweird, as I call it. Again, that's been this spell cast, hasn't it, on our consciousness. So amazing that you got to go there and kind of have that experience, though. And like you say, you got 2 books out of it, so that's really cool. But we know that they use movies, don't they? That with the pre, the programming, the pre-programming, the soft disclosures of what they're doing, what they're gonna do, etc. And we know that the stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame is serious worship, really. It's the inverted pentagrams, the red carpet, the blood, and celebrity means ritual or mass. So they're actually casting these spells, and we've all been walking like zombies, not knowing who we are, just in this dream state, really.
That's right.
And I think we're all starting to come out of it. And that's why I was picking you up in the intro, even though you think, you said, oh, I don't know whether I deserve that accolade. But, people like us speak now, like yourself, and honestly, John's books like this. If you're not much of a reader, just buy one anyway, because you can at least, smack Freemasons over the head with it, or the people that are still asleep. I'm terrible.
Or use it as a doorstop or something like that. I've been told it's a great cure for insomnia as well, so that might go down well.
Exactly. And this is it, and it's coming to light bit by bit. Do you think, John, that we're in this kind of, do you see it as a spiritual battle or a spiritual war, or do you just see it as, like saying, like we said earlier? I think that there are these elite families, going back to the Rothschilds there. Rothschild means red shield, and our red dragon, and they are the 13th order of the dragon. I think these families just have got this occult knowledge that we're all trying to push and bring back through so that we can remember who we are. But do you think it's a spiritual battle?
Yeah, to a certain extent, I do. I'm perhaps a bit different in the sense that I I deal in more in hard factual stuff. You know, the books that I write, that it's factual stuff. I tend to stay away from the esoteric, and the only reason that I do is not because I don't believe in it or think it's the real and there. It's just because I can't put a handle on it. I can't say that yes, that is definitely that, or this is definitely this. Whereas in my books, I deal in facts. So, you know, I do a little bit of speculation, but to be honest, all this esoteria is all speculation. You can never actually say, yeah, this is definitely what happened, or this is definitely what's going on, because it's kind of airy fairy out there, you know, and it comes down to opinion at the end of the day. Whereas, you know, to be fair to myself, in my books, I talk about historical lies, you know, facts.
Yeah.
You know, I wrote a book about the COVID scam called Welcome to the Masquerade. I wrote that with Shannon Rowan, who's my friend, lives in the States. And she.
Oh, sorry, I thought she was your partner, so I got that
No,
wrong.
my
I do
partner's called.
apologise.
No, so she's kind of a partner. She's my writing partner, but
Writing partner.
yeah, no, my partner is called Karen actually, and yeah, but
Oh,
you met Karen, yeah, you met Karen with the red hair, yeah.
sorry,
Yeah.
Karen. It's me age.
No, it's all right. But yeah, and in Welcome to the Masquerade, that in that book, it's mainly through Shannon's influence. We did a lot of esoteric stuff in that book. There is a lot of stuff about spirituality and the way that the COVID scam was manipulated and all this kind of stuff and all the, you know, the I keep using the word, but esoteric influences within the COVID scam itself. It's absolutely fascinating. But you know, that as I said, that was more Shannon's influence. I tend to be more about hard facts kind of man. So it's not that I deliberately steer away from it. It's just that it doesn't kind of go with what I do, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I think that that's it, isn't it? These things we can kind of compartmentalize them and do so for right action, really. Because some people, if you started to mix those two things, I don't think it would have the same crossover. And it's already information that people, you know, have got that cognitive dissonance. They've been lied to all their lives, like you say, the complete falsification of history, the falsification of science. So if you
Yeah,
started to come in with the little bit more esoteric and you know they'll dismiss that, and I think that's
yeah,
what's beautiful about us all connecting, working with each other
absolutely,
together, because then
absolutely.
people can take what they're ready for at what
Yeah,
time. You know, I'm
yeah,
still learning. You know, the thing is to never think that you've got the, you know, your finger on the pulse, but like you say, you keeping it more factual. It's the
yeah,
same with the law. I do a lot of crossover because there's so much occult in the law, but you know, without getting into that, you know,
yeah,
you
yeah,
look at this book in itself, my Black's Law book. It's a book of black spells, you know, without a shadow of a doubt.
all right.
And that kind of, but we can prove that. It's like what the Baron taught me when he taught me, you know, commercialized liens. A fact is a fact, and you can't argue a fact. And I think that's like really key with us moving forward, that we kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
have that slight differentiation so that we don't
yeah,
kind of mess our own heads up and others. But it's all part of the same puzzle in the beautiful
yeah,
tapestry of oh my God, shit, holy moly, I see it type of thing. But
yeah,
so back to the Titanic, and I think, like I say, most people know that story, and if they want to deep dive it, then you know, come and deep dive
yeah,
it with yourself. But you know, it takes it back to JFK, doesn't it? And the assassination of JFK, because obviously JFK was trying to disband the Federal Reserve. And I deep
yeah.
dived this when I, you know, was very, very young. So can you tell us a
Hmm.
bit like and I know you can only give us a meme because we haven't got time, and
Yeah,
you know, can you imagine?
yeah, yeah.
I
I
think
know
you said you
it's
do like 4 or 5 hour podcasts on one topic and you're still not scratching the surface, but we do like a
yeah,
good meme at that matters. So and link that, how
yeah.
does
No,
that link in it?
yeah, well, you're right. I mean, JFK, what JFK did, he introduced a currency which bypassed the Federal Reserve because, I mean, JFK was a very astute guy in many ways, but he unfortunately wasn't astute enough to see that he was going to get his comeuppance, which obviously he did. And the reason he did was, I think that when he introduced, he introduced an executive order which I mean, when you think about the concept of an executive order, a presidential executive order, it's absolutely ridiculous, really, because it's basically totally undemocratic. It's just the president deciding that he is going to do something outside of, you know, Congress and outside of the due process of law. So anyway, that's as maybe. He introduced something called Executive Order 11110, which actually bypassed the Federal Reserve and gave the American government the right to start printing money again. And that, I think, was his death knell. Okay. But having said that, there was far more to it than that. My book that I've written is called JFK, A Very British Coup. And it's called A Very British Coup because it was actually planned and carried out by MI6 on behalf of the British Crown. And again, I go into massive detail about this and how that was carried out and why. And, the people don't believe me when I tell them this. They just look at me incredulously when I tell them this. But two of the main people involved in organising it were a man by the name of Ian Fleming, who wrote the James Bond stories, who was an MI6 agent, and another guy by the name of Roald Dahl, who was also an MI6 agent and was very, very deeply involved. But yeah, sorry, I'm getting off the topic a little bit. But
oh no, it's good. No, it's great. I'm like, these are what the nuggets are. This is great. I didn't know that.
So that was introducing the bypass Federal Reserve currency was definitely the trigger, because this was literally a few weeks before he was murdered. And by the way, I don't know if you know, but it was originally planned to be assassinated in Chicago the previous month, but it leaked. The plan leaked, so they had to cancel it. So they used Dallas instead a month later. Little aside there, interesting aside. But yeah, that was the catalyst. But prior to that, Kennedy had proceeded to upset every single element of the New World Order. If you like, I don't think it's called the New World Order then, but in effect it was. So he upset Israel, who weren't that powerful at that time, not like they are now, but nevertheless, he upset Israel. He upset the Catholic Church. He upset the Texas oil barons. He definitely upset the British, because this is what kicked it off. Because right, okay. So in a nutshell, the British Crown, and I don't mean the royalty, but by the British Crown, I don't mean royalty. And the British Crown is the Crown Temple. It's the financial hub of the world, basically, in the City of London. That's the Crown. So he upset them, and just about every faction you can mention. He threatened to split the CIA into a million pieces. He upset the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover, who was head of the FBI at the time, absolutely detested him, and it was mutual. So all these things conspired against him. And as I say, all those elements are controlled by the British Crown, even American governmental stuff. And again, this comes as a real shock to people when I tell them this, and most people don't believe it, but it's easy to prove. It's all laid out in the book. The British Crown still controls the United States of America, because what happened was, even though America ostensibly got its independence in 1776, 95 years later, the country, United States of America, actually went bankrupt. And the only way that they could save themselves was by getting in hoc back to the British Empire at that time. And so a new United States of America was formed using all capital letters, the United States of America. And it was a different country to the one that had gone bankrupt. The other one was scrapped. But this time, 95 years after the independence, they were now back under the control of the British Crown. And this is the crux of it all. And this is why the book is called JFK, A Very British Coup, because it was the British that actually wanted rid of him for all his misdemeanors, for all the stuff he was doing. Because to be fair to the guy, he was a man of the people, and he was trying to help people. We know what happens historically to anyone who tries to help his own people at the expense of big corporations and the banking system. They don't want to throw it. So
and he didn't, did he? And it's interesting. I always found that obviously he's allegedly one of these 13 bloodlines. Back to this 13th order of the dragon. The tribe of Dan controlling Ludan or Lundan, like you say, the Temple Bar, really. And I did a video on the elections that are coming up. And the Temple Bar are the fake executors of our trusts. And this is the con and the fraud and the deceit and the treason now against the people to subvert the constitution of this country. And but he was one of these bloodlines, but he always seemed to be doing whether it's like that the double-headed god Janus back in both sides to give us the theatre of that or not. But
Mm.
like you say, anybody who's doing those kind of roles is
Yeah,
quickly kind of shot at and or sacrificed, aren't they? And
yeah,
America, as you said, John, Rome called this land is called Albion, but Rome came along and called it Mercia. So that's why you get Mercia, America. York, going back to Yorkshire.
mm,
York was allegedly ancient Babylon. So what they're doing, and you'd have to watch some of my other videos for that. We haven't got time to get into it that we do with
yeah,
Neil, where we get into this. But that
mm,
York was ancient Babylon, so that's where you get New York. And
yes,
as above, so below, we're learning that actually the constellations in the sky are actually in the landscape here and in Mercia. And it's absolutely mind-boggling when you get into all that, but that's like a different department, really. But
yeah,
yeah, I think it all leads back to banking, doesn't it? All
yeah,
roads lead to Rome. That kind of goes
absolutely.
where you really deep dive the banking system. And I
Yeah,
always say we can just get people to grasp that, to grasp kind of how economics works. I think was
mm,
it Henry Ford, who said when the American people learn how the banking system works, then there will be a revolution tomorrow.
yeah,
And I think Rothschilds, I care not who runs the country. Show me
yeah,
who kind of prints the money, who controls that, and
exactly.
that's what we're kind of labouring under. So talking about this kind of independence of America, we're getting on to the 4th of July, which is coming up this week on Thursday.
Yeah,
So I've just done a video, John, about the elections, and as we know, the system's just a complete con and a fraud.
yeah,
And they actually worship the Eastern Star, these families, which is the Eastern Star rises on the 4th of July. It's actually linked to harvest in a positive sense, but it's also that, this energy harvest of people. And,
mm,
this is why we're all queuing up to, well, I'm not, but we're queuing up to put an X in a box. And what are your thoughts on the elections? Because I've done this video where obviously we know that voting, when you put the X, you're literally classing yourself as illiterate. You're declaring yourself a lunatic and an imbecile. You're declaring yourself a pleb. And actually, that's why they call them opinion polls. They might just say
yeah,
the polls now, but do you remember they used to say the opinion polls?
I
Because
do.
polls just means opinion. So,
Yeah.
it's like trying to get people to kind of grasp that, isn't it? Where do you stand on that, knowing what you know now?
Well, first of all, I'd like to just make the point that I think this is a truism, but I'll say it anyway, and that is that democracy is basically the best system that money can buy because it
Yeah.
actually it gives them the power to fool us into believing that we actually have a say in our futures. When in actual
Yeah.
fact, politicians, political parties, not just in this country but the world over, they're just puppets. They're just puppets of the people who sit above here. So no matter who gets in, it doesn't matter. I mean, I use this glib phrase all the time. I never vote because it doesn't matter who you vote for because at the end of the day, the government always gets in, and it's very true.
Yeah.
It's a glib statement, and but yeah, it's just a mechanism to make us believe that we actually have a say in our own futures. So voting is futile because if voting actually ever changed anything, they wouldn't allow it. There's no there's no way they would. So we get all this stuff about the Reform Party now. At the end of the day, Nigel Farage, he's just a globalist, just like the rest of them. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, they might do one or two things differently, but they won't be allowed to change anything radically. They might spout a lot of stuff in their election manifesto, as all parties do, and they never carry it out. But at the end of the day, nothing's going to change. Not within the system. The whole system needs scrapping, and we need a much more
Yeah.
equitable form of government than we have now.
Yeah. And
I don't
like I say,
pretend to know
it's
how
like
that would work.
even the word government, I always say if we could just get people to understand that it literally translates in Latin to mind control, that they're
Yeah,
constantly telling us all the time. And it goes again, it's back to banking, that these three crowns of Zion, they call it, which is to subvert, to invert, and to pervert. And
mm,
that's kind of what we're seeing, with our children in our schools, it's like what I always say, I've nothing against you if you're a grown man and you want to go and change your sex. I'm with your brother. But when they're trying to bring it into to our sons and daughters in school, and when it becomes an agenda, that's the
That's it.
crossover, that's the difference,
That's
and
the
that's
word,
what we're seeing.
Carly. Yeah, agenda. And this, I use this all the time. It's the agenda. It's the narrative. They've got a sinister reason for doing all this. Which I'm sure is manifold, but I believe that the reason for all this LGBTQ promotion, like you say, I've got nothing against anybody who's got an affinity with the same sex. What they do with their own lives and in their own times is entirely their business. But what I do object to is having that agenda thrust into my face and into the face of my children and my grandchildren. I just
Exactly.
find that objectionable. And why are they doing it? They're doing it because it's part of the pop. In my view, okay, this is just my view. I've got no proof other than that it fits in with the narrative. The reason that they do it is to do with the depopulation agenda, because same-sex couples, transgender people do not reproduce. And you might say, well, that's just it wouldn't even scratch the surface of the population issue. No, but it doesn't matter. It's part of it. There's many more serious issues going on with population reduction than that. But nevertheless, it's part of it, and it's also a way of subverting people. It's a way of making us. It's a way of kind of. I'm struggling for a phrase here, but it's kind of it's turning us into perverted people. That's not the real phrase that I meant to say, but it's kind of destroying our humanity in some way, and they love doing that. It's just a way of controlling us psychologically as well. Yeah. So I didn't explain that very well, but I hope you kind of get what I
No,
mean.
no, yeah, absolutely. And it's a Zionist toolbox basically, and adding the mass migration, the division. I mean,
Yeah.
again, it's in some of our other videos, so I won't get into it too much. But this again, look over here. They're getting us to look at Israel, and I know you touched on it then, John. But the state of Israel means the state without Israel. It's and we're actually saying that Israel is us. It's our bodies. It's where we're at. It's in our frequency. It's in our consciousness. But again,
Yeah.
might be a little bit too woo woo. But again, these elections, it's like when I say you don't have to believe it, but they most certainly do. This X
Exactly.
in the box, which represents your coffin, which represents the dead fiction. And like we've got to breathe life back into ourselves. We've got to realize that we are living men and women, and that there is a
Yes.
constitution of Great Britain and England, and that these feckers are subverting it, and it's treason ultimately. At the least, it's misfeasance, malfeasance, and non-feasance, and all the feasances, as I said yesterday.
Yeah.
And they are worshipping and they are enslaving us with debt via the banking system. And if you want to
Yeah.
deep dive that, go get John's book. But did you see this was an interesting one, John? I don't know whether you've seen this, but going back to codes and signs and symbols. Are you aware of Marina Abramovic, if I'm saying that word
Yes, I am.
correctly?
I know who she is. Yeah.
Yeah. And she was down in Glastonbury, wasn't she, recently? I just put a post up in the
Yeah.
networking Dark Matters. And she said she was going to Glastonbury to try and get as much energy as she can. And then she went on the pyramid stage. I mean, say no more. Let's not
Yeah. Yeah.
have an occult decode on that. Then we get that one. And then she blew herself up as the peace sign. Have you seen the image of it?
No.
I'll put it up as we talk about it. But again, the peace sign is actually called the Teutonic rune of death, and represents an upside down cross. So it was such a satanic ritual for us
Right.
lot to be able to see it. And she made the crowd go silent for 7 minutes, allegedly, and then made them scream 3 times. And it's just like, avert my eyes. And John, they were going to try and make this woman the educational minister for the Ukraine. I mean, this woman is a dark witch, really,
Yeah.
and she also, Ukraine was old Khazaria. Khazaria was Canaan, and this is why they're called Slavic countries, because they were the slave traders of old. And again, it goes all the way back and comes back round to banking. See judge, see
Yes.
postmaster, see banker. We
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
banking and take our courts back from being private courts and put them back into public courts. That's what we need to be doing. But anyway, enough of that.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
being from Yorkshire,
Keep mentioning this.
you know what?
Have you got a thing about Yorkshire?
But the
You
thing about Yorkshire at
Lancastrian
the
you.
moment, yeah, I have. I'm kind of slightly jealous of the Yorkshire people at the moment. Well,
uh,
I think it is like a lot of great researchers, including yourself. I met a guy called Larry. Larry Cyprus, and we did a podcast with him, and he's northern. I think he's Lancashire. He's on my side. Neil's Lancashire. Terry, we're doing a lot of the law with Yorkshire. The Baron who taught me Yorkshire. Richie, a friend of mine. Shane, Andy Truman, they're all Yorkshire lads, and it's these Yorkshire
right.
men are going, nah, I'm not fucking having that. Like you were saying, let men be men and women be women, and how they're trying to destroy that. And
Yeah.
it does seem that there's the Yorkshire men are leading the charge. Like, what's your thoughts on that? I think it's that no
Yeah.
nonsense thing that Yorkshire men do. They go, oh God, I'm not having that. But then they know all
How
about
much?
constitutional law and all the knowledge that you've got, and they're just going, nah, not having that. They're just like cut through the crap.
Yeah.
How do you ever get invited back to your own hometown, John? Because a friend of mine says I've never been asked to go to Bolton to do a talk because they're probably thinking she's full of it. Do you think you can be a prophet in your own hometown?
Um,
How are you received in Yorkshire?
I actually, my hometown is a place called Home Firth, which is near Huddersfield, which is just on the border between Yorkshire and Greater Manchester, like just the right side of the Pennines, there, I say. And yeah, I mean it's only a tiny place, but if you count Huddersfield as my hometown, sadly, I've never ever been invited back there at all. And I'll tell you now, lots of people will not invite me for one particular reason, because they say that I'm a Holocaust denier, which is true. But
Wow.
but I have reasons for that because I've researched it and I know the truth. I'm not going to say any more about that because I don't want to cause any.
No, it's a very touchy subject,
Very
isn't it?
emotive.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there, and I agree with you, John. That helps. So
Yeah.
that's me shot. But
Okay.
the thing is, it is part of that. Anyone who's speaking out or critically thinking, you're either a conspiracy theorist, you're anti-Semitic, you're transphobic, and that's how these loony left woke brigade, and then we get labelled right wing and all, and all
Yeah.
the labels that you never chuck at us for just kind of like you say, using facts, using logic, using the ability to critically think and break these things down, and
Yeah.
certainly, we. And it's like what I say, a Zionist isn't a Jew. That they're two completely separate things. And actually, what we found out is that the Jews, because J is Latinized, because I love my language, would have been the Jews. They would have been the Druids of old.
Yes.
And again, it's all just been hijacked. They've called Jews over there, said that's why they're bombing the crap out of Palestine and so on and so forth. But like you say, it's a touchy subject that we probably should.
Well, it's very, very controversial, isn't it? But yeah, on
Very.
that topic of all these different labels that we get accused of being, it is just a weapon that they use. That they turn these labels into kind of insults, into derogatory terms. They're very skillful at doing stuff like this, and it's kind of an offshoot of NLP, really. The way that they've actually hijacked these terms or created these terms in many cases and attached a very, very negative meaning to them. And that's what we get accused of. I have a slide that I show. Well, you were at my presentation in Burnley.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember it, but one of the slides I actually say right at the very beginning before I get into the meat of the presentation, I talk about being a conspiracy theorist and what that really means. And then I say, but not only am I a conspiracy theorist, I've also been accused of being a racist, misogynistic, homophobic, Holocaust denying, anti-Semitic, COVID denying, anti-vaxxer, and a climate change denying, anti-science, flat earth loony, an extreme right-wing terrorist. And I usually get a round of applause for that. But what the point I'm making there is that all those elements, all those isms, all those terms that we get accused of, that's not just me, obviously, everybody does what we do, Carl, who get accused of this from time to time. All those terms are stuff that go against their agenda. So that's why they've got these negative labels attached to them. And that's why it's almost criminal to be one of those things. You can't be a racist. You can't have an opinion,
Yeah.
but I'm not a racist person, but I speak out against immigration, uncontrolled immigration. If that makes me racist, okay, so be it. I'm not
Yeah,
misogynistic. I'm not homophobic. But those labels get attached to us because that is a way of controlling the narrative, and they're very good at it.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's it. You've hit the nail on the head again. They are controlling this narrative. And that controls consciousness because we respond as a human race to stories. So
Yeah,
that's kind of quite easily hijack this kind of dream state that they've got us in, kind of creating that reality, if I've gone too far there. But certainly
yes,
this emotional response that we've seen, I said it on our interview with Matt and John. That's what happened at the beginning of the pandemic, the pandemic, because I was giving facts, and it's back to that, let's stick to the facts of the case,
mm,
that they were going, oh my God, you're disgusting, because I'm trying to call it out and help people.
yeah,
And I got absolutely crucified and attacked, on social media and the rest. I was doing videos about viral theory, that you can't catch a virus, but I was coming with papers, with research, with study. I was coming with the patents that I'd read about, coronavirus. I was coming at it with all the language. And I even went on the Office for National Statistics, and it said, that people were at the death rate was lower than the 5-year average for that year. So but still, you're disgusting, because they just were believing the nonsense and the hype that they were being told
yeah,
in the Saturn
yeah.
box cube in the corner,
It's a classic case of I've made my mind up. Don't confuse me with the facts. Yeah. So,
Exactly. And it was funny when you did start with that, like the list of insults. Like I did absolutely resonate with that one because it does
yeah,
say in scripture, and I don't know, I say scripture's a code for the adept, it's another code. But in the end of days, evil will be seen as good and good will be seen as evil. So as we're trying to, protect children, as like say, I've nothing against multiculturalism, I'm no racist, but I will talk out about the decimation of our land. With the agenda, it all goes back to that word, the transhumanism, all this stuff, the agenda, the agenda, the agenda. It's nothing. I'm for my brothers and sisters. We all need to unite and come together. And they want division, 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 don't we? As they
yeah.
know.
And then
Do you want to
when they
quickly?
talk about
Oh, sorry.
multiculturalism, I'll just say this. Sorry to kind of hijack it, but
No, no, no,
when
you're
talking
fine.
about that is actually doing, it's actually creating division. You know,
Yeah,
to me, culture is sacrosanct. Why do they want to bring it into a big melting pot and make everybody just this homogenous
yeah,
person? This non-racial, you know, uh, coffee
yeah,
colored person. Why do they want that? Well, we know why, and I'm not going to go into it, but I'm just making that point. They
yeah,
talk about it as though it's multiculturalism is actually uh, being, helping the different races, but it's not. It's destroying them. If
yeah,
we all end up as just one culture, one race, that is destruction, not positive. Sorry, I'll
yeah.
just
No, no,
aside.
no, you're right. You're absolutely bang on. Like I say, there's strength in our culture, isn't there? And it gets weakened and weakened and weakened with this. And like I say, there's nothing racist about that. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, it's like when I always use the example, like I went to Italy this year, not for the first time. I have been to Rome with my dad many years ago, but I went to Venice and on my own, and I kind of had a spin around Venice, there's this woman in her 40s, like some kind of what was it called, that film when she goes to Greece? I can't remember anyway. Julie, what's it
Uh,
called? Anyway,
uh,
so I'm in Venice, and I fell in love with the place, the culture, the people, the food. And the thing is, in Venice, they've got a very strong family unit. I'm not saying Venice, Italian culture is perfect, but they
no,
don't sell their properties either. And I got chatting to a lot of Italians, and they keep the properties in the family. They hand it down. They keep their culture very tight, very strong, and it's beautiful. Because I go to Italy to experience Italy. I want to go to Italy to experience Italian culture. Now, if you're going to come to this country soon, where is Great Britain? And Great Britain means people of the covenant, and the power has and always was reserved and with us, the people of this land. and it's a beautiful thing, and it is being decimated, and like you say,
Yeah.
they're out to kind of divide and weaken us
Mm.
as a
Well, if anybody's interested in a deeper dive into that, I would suggest they Google. Well, not I was going to say Google. Don't use Google, but use a better search engine.
engine of choice.
Yeah, and look up the Coudenhove-Kalergi plan. That will tell you everything you want to know about what's going on there. And that
Yeah,
was something that was sorry.
yeah, they tell us, don't they? They always
Yeah,
put it out there. It's just
yeah, yeah,
people are so apathetic. People think things are going to go back to normal, and unfortunately, that
yeah,
ain't the case, right? But we keep on keeping on. Well, anyway, quickly, because when you did do your talk in Burnley, and I mean, this is and well, perhaps, the climate change, obviously, nonsense. You did a talk on that when we were in Burnley, like
yes,
specifically. And it did make me chuckle about the electric cars, and it shows the level of brainwashing upon people, doesn't it? Could you
yeah,
quickly give us like a meme on the electric car? Because I was chuckling at it, the way you kind of, brought it down into a succinct, because that's how ridiculous this stuff is, isn't it? Like, and it really does
yeah,
highlight.
yeah. Well, I mean, they obviously tell us that electric cars are far greener, but when you actually look into it, just scratch the surface of it. Electric cars are not green at all because, for one, just this may come as a shock to some people, but how much does an electric car battery weigh? Okay, well, I actually did the same talk again last night in Mablethorpe that you attended in Burnley, and they I said, how much does an electric car battery weigh? And people said, like, I can't remember what it was, ridiculous amount. But the truth is they weigh between half a ton and a ton, depending on the model. Okay, the battery of the car is the entire floor of the car. Okay, so it's not just like a normal car battery. It's a huge thing that weighs a massive amount. What they're going to do with that when they run out, when they actually expire in 80,000 miles, because that's all they last, a maximum of 80,000 miles. And by the way, they cost around £10,000 to replace. What they're going to do with all that stuff? Where's it going to go? I'll tell you where it's going to go, into landfills. And it's not like normal cars where you can you can break it down for parts and actually give it a new life in another car. You can't do that. It's just a big lump that's going to sit in a landfill. And these things are deadly dangerous. Okay, when they catch fire, and they do frequently, I think there's been something like 200 car fires in London alone this year, all caused by electric car batteries igniting spontaneously, which they tend to do. And when they do ignite spontaneously, you can't put them out. They just will not extinguish.
Yeah.
I think on that, in the presentation, well, no, in that presentation, a quote by a guy who's an advisor to the UK Fire Chiefs Council, and he said things like, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was things like, you got to get away from it because it gives off toxic fumes when it burns. It fires individual battery cells like bullets in all directions as it's burning. And you can't put it out with water, or you need an absolute massive amount of water to put it out. 16,000 litres, I believe, is the figure that have been quoted. And yeah, the production of it, by manufacturers' own admission, electric cars are approximately 70% of a 70% larger carbon footprint than the production of a standard car, okay, a non-electric car. And it takes approximately 70 to 80,000 miles to make up that carbon footprint difference, before you actually start gaining the benefits of having an electric car, which coincidentally is about the same length of time that an electric car battery lasts. So, QED, I mean, that just completely negates the whole thing. There's been countless incidents of because they weigh so much. They weigh like 40% more than the same model non-electric. They weigh 40% more. So there's the road safety aspect. There's the damage to the roads aspect, because the heavier the car, the more dangerous it'll be to road surfaces and to pedestrians. If you get hit by a 1-ton car, yeah, it'd be serious. But if you get hit by a 2-ton car, it's twice as serious. and so on. I could go on for a long time, but I think you get the gist of that.
No, it was super interesting, and it's that ridiculous it becomes funny, doesn't it?
Yeah,
It's like the Divine Comedy out the window, as I say. It's that ridiculous. You do have to
it
start
is. Yeah,
laughing, and I mean,
yeah.
I was laughing on the like I say with John on the last interview, and it can come across that I'm quite flippant about it, but it was interesting. Recently, I had my astrology chart done, and in my first temple, I'm
Mhm.
Libran, which is scales, law, justice, right? You know, all this kind of
Oh,
stuff.
really? Right. Yeah. Of course.
And then, but what I also had in on my 11th node or whatever was Pluto, which is the Lord of Hell and Death. So I have that running through my veins. So it's like I'm dead cheery and I'm like, come on, let's get this done. But I'm also like, right, this is getting ridiculous now. So I don't have that kind of fear of death. But so I do kind of come across as like, laughing at it. But I think if laughter's the highest, one of the highest frequencies, right? We've got to keep laughing. If
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
that ridiculous, it's
yeah,
like, oh
yeah.
my days.
One
But
of the things I always say is, to people, people say, oh God, John, what are we going to do? They're going to do this, they're going to do that, they're going to do the other. And my response
Yeah.
to that is always the same, and it is, I've been doing this for 27 years, and most, not all, but most of the stuff that they say is going to happen this year, next year, whenever, never happens. It's mainly fear mongering. So I suggest to people, you know, live your lives, be happy, enjoy your friends, enjoy your family, have a good time, forget about all this shit. Forget about all this shit because worrying about it is not going to solve anything. And that's what they want you to do. They want you to be in fear because that lowers your vibration. It makes you easier to control. And this is why they do it. So a lot of this stuff, just don't worry about it. I get up every morning. I thank the creator for being alive for one more day at my age.
Yeah.
And and I just enjoy myself, and yeah, I do this, I do my research, I write my books, but I don't let it interfere with my life. I compartmentalize it because I don't want it lowering my vibration. I don't want it turning me into a miserable old bastard. So yeah, that's my philosophy.
No, and that's right, in it. And I think, a lot of people who kind of freshly awake to this stuff, it's almost like they're going through that 5 stages of grief, and you can go through
Yes,
anger, the confusion, but then it
yes,
goes into acceptance. And as we know, false evidence appearing real, like your falsification of history or the falsification of science. There's a big difference between science and dollar science and this
yeah,
whole fuckery that we've had. And trying to, if you're a newbie at it,
yeah,
it's extremely worrying and daunting, and I think a lot of people, like
absolutely,
say, John, are like, what can we do? And but the first thing you can do is remove the fear,
yeah,
because like you say, that's where they're getting us. Everything is a con. It's all, I always say, it's all an illusion in the minds of men. And when we get to that, like I say, it's all like that Gary Waterman. I don't know whether you've seen it, who Richard Forbes interviewed, and he's revealing
no,
that all these companies and corporate entities that are committing all this corporatocracy
yeah,
upon us, etc., and taking away, our inherent rights. They're not even registered properly. They're not. Nothing's ever signed. Not even at that level. It's
right,
a complete. It's time for us all just to, the judges have no bonds. The judges have no oaths. So
no,
it's like it's an illusion, and we
mm,
we think we're making it real. So I think it
yeah,
definitely is beyond that world, beyond the world, not in it. Like you with your writing and your talks, that's right action, isn't it? But you're
yeah,
like me, I've had to learn to have a balance in it and go away and sniff the flowers and hug the dog and spend time with my mum and what
yeah,
all the beautiful things that I was just doing 15-hour days, 15-hour days. And all you do in the end is burn yourself out. And then when you kind of get it more, you start to chuckle, don't you? Why does the Buddha laugh? Because he
mm,
gets it. And we just
yeah,
kind of keep plodding on, keep on
yeah.
keeping on in it, John.
Absolutely, yeah, and that is what I will. That's what I always say to people. Erase the fear, eliminate the fear, forget it. Just don't don't ignore what's going on, but don't let it rule your lives because this is what they want. They want it to
Yeah.
totally overwhelm you and envelop you in their fear. That's what they want because, like I say, it makes you easy to control.
So,
Yeah,
John, what have you got coming up next? What can we look forward to coming from your camp?
yeah, well, hopefully by the end of this year, this came totally out of the blue to me, but I am actually jointly writing a novel with someone who contacted me and said he had this idea for a novel. Now, I've got a friend over Lancashire way, actually, Paul Hargreaves. Hi, Paul. Are you all right? And he's is my best mate, and he's been saying to me for years. He said you should write novels. He said because novels are a great way of getting into people's heads and using it as a subtle way of waking them up. You know, writing it as though it's a novel, but in reality, dropping all these truth bombs into it. And I kept thinking, yeah, I'll never get around to it. I hate writing novels. So what happened a couple of months ago? A guy contacted me. Hi, Andy. You're right, mate. And he said, I'm thinking of writing a novel, but I'm not a writer. He said, I've got this idea, and I wondered if you'd kind of come in on the project with me, and we can produce this novel. And so that's what I'm doing. And it's called Beyond the Wall, and it's about Antarctica and flat Earth, right? And it's a great. I mean, he's got his, you know, bless him, he's had a great idea, and it's progressing, you know, very, very nicely now. So we hopefully by the end of the year this should be out. And again, it's like I say, it's totally out of the blue for me. I never expected to write another novel, but I think that's where it's going next. It's a nice departure, actually.
Interesting. I'm of the camp. It's not flat. It's not round. I think it's kind of a bit of a both. But we
Yeah,
probably don't have time to go there. But there's
no,
definitely something going on. So I look forward to
yeah,
that.
yeah. Absolutely. I'm not an out and out flat earther. I mean, I think there is a
No.
lot of positives to the flat earth theory, but I'm more of a globe earth denier than a flat earth fanatic.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? There's something
Mm,
going on. It's some torus
yeah,
field or some eyeball with things, and then it's got a spherical. I know
yeah,
it's deep. I think it's as above, so below. So I think it's like an eyeball with a concave with a protective sphere over it, but it's kind of flat. But it's sphere. Oh my God! It could, yeah.
it might
It
be a
just it
pyramid.
blows.
No, I'm just
I
being
was gonna
silly
say,
now.
I don't know basically, but that's kind of
Yeah,
that's as far as I go with in my head. But yeah,
yeah.
awesome. We'll look forward to that. Thank you so much for taking time out to have a chat with us, John. It's been very
My pleasure.
illuminating.
Thank you, Carly.
Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.